Welcome back for another book review. Today we are talking about this one. So this is Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs and Other Questions About Dead Bodies by Doughty. So this is such a fun book. I have listened to her books on Audible, but I decided to actually read her books because I am working on my own death book, and I was like, I feel like there were some things in here that I couldn't remember all of the details, so I was like, they're at the library, I might as well get them. Eventually I do want to own copies of them all, but for now I just rented them. So this book is so much fun. So this is one that you wouldn't think would be fun, but honestly her way of talking is perfect because it kind of breaks that barrier that a lot of people feel when discussing death. Because we have questions. Inevitably, at some point in your life, perhaps it was more when you were a child versus an adult, because I feel like that fear really kicks in as an adult, whereas as a child you're way more curious. And if you can tap back into that childhood curiosity, some people, like myself, we maintain that all the time. Always curious about all things like creepy and morbid, including, obviously, death. And so there's a lot of like random questions that you're like, I do wonder. And this is presented, honestly, like it's questions that children have asked, and this does come across a little more fun and lighthearted on a very heavy topic compared to her other book that I have read so far. I'll be talking about that as well today. You won't see it today, but I think you'll see it in a week. I don't know which order you're seeing these, but it's on my stack back here. It's From Here to Eternity. That one was a much more somber tone. This is a lot more lighthearted. I mean, there's a question of like, if an astronaut dies in space, what happens? And like, it's just a lot of, this is a lot more lighthearted of answers, but still actually informative. And really, this is one of those books that I think everybody should read at some point. Is it a very heavy topic? Yes. However, this answers a lot of questions, and it can open the door to having discussions that need to be had. Because again, death is going to happen to us all at some point, sometime, whether it's next week or 50 years from now, you too shall die. And it's good to have these conversations, whether it is, this is your opening of like, maybe having a plan of like, maybe have somebody who's gonna check in on you once a week, so that you're not there for months and your cat is eating your eyeballs. Like, there's just a lot that this book can bring up. And like, I remember that when we went to the last funeral in October, that like my niece had a bunch of death questions, and I'm like, this is one of those books. Like, there are very few books that I just feel like I need to have multiple copies just so that when somebody has a question, I can just casually be like, here you go. Like, this is a great intro to the questions you've got. And like, they're very random questions, don't get me wrong, but like, there's just a lot, and there's so much information that the average person who is not morbidly curious and isn't actively looking this up would not know, but would maybe be curious about. Like, there's just so much good in this book. And the way she writes it is just fun. It doesn't feel like this like taboo, like secretive topic. And it also isn't like this better than thou attitude. Like, she's just really down to earth. She's hilarious. If you've ever watched her channel, she's super funny. And like, her writing in this sounds exactly like her channel. I love her channel. It's Ask a Mortician. And like, this is just, it's such a good book. Like, I feel like everybody should read this at some point. Now, because like, I feel like this could easily be a book that you could read with maybe older kids. Like, if they're getting death curious, like maybe around like 10 to 12, and they're like curious about what's going on, this might be a good book to go through together and like answer questions together. Like, it's just one of those that it's a really good intro. And again, they're questions from kids, so kids are curious. Like, they want to know. I remember being a kid when, actually I was about 10, when my grandma on my dad's side passed away. And I remember thinking about it and like very morbidly and like having questions that it's like, I know I can't ask these, they're really not good, but it's like, you get curious. Like, you know that they're in the ground, but like, what order does things, you know, stop being? And like what actually happens during sitting in the ground, you know? Like, you know, the imagination runs wild. Like what happens to your eyeballs? And I think it was this book that answers that a little bit and talks about how like the blood pooling, rigor mortis, like there's a lot of stuff in here that, again, it's gonna happen to everybody. And it's just one of those books that, like, again, I reflect back to when I was at the last funeral we were at. My niece had a bunch of questions like, this is a good book. This is great to start the conversation about the topic and to answer some of those questions, because sometimes it does take like a death to happen that you start to have that conversation. And this is just a good resource to get started. The audiobook version of this is fantastic. The way she just phrases things is so much fun. It's just like her channel, just like listening to a really long video of hers. So obviously, moral of the story, I would love for everybody to get a copy of this book. You should read it. It's great, it's fantastic. There is a teensy tiny bit of pagan in here, which is, can we give grandma a Viking funeral? Spoiler, no. And honestly, actually, the way she talked about it, it was a really fun chapter in this book. You should definitely just go get a copy of this book. If you have read this one, which was your favorite section, I do think, I don't know that I could pick a favorite, to be honest, because like all of these are just interesting and intriguing. The artwork was fun in here because they all had something to do with the topic. Like, just the artwork, it's so much fun. Like this one was, will my hair keep growing in my coffin after I'm buried? Like, such good things. This book is a definite must, especially if you're like just starting into like contemplating death and like your own mortality. This is a good kind of intro book into the topic. Anyways, I would love to hear your thoughts on this one in the comments down below. Huge thank you to my patrons. I'll have their names here on the screen. If you'd like to support me and get access to exclusive content, it is patreon.com/nightwillowcrafts. Make sure to check out my blog. That is where I post all of my content, including my books, if you'd like to check those out as well. Until next time, thank you so much for watching, and blessed be.